What happens when one man tries to watch all of the sci-fi films of the 1980s? Well, we're about to find out because I'm your host, Josh Spiegel, and this is the 80s Project. So far, 1983 has been pretty epic, considering that we've already had a Star War. But as the year continues, we're going to see that there was still some wild stuff. And I promised that the Sci-Fi Project would cover fantasy and superheroes as well. And this episode has quite a bit of that. And we'll find out which of these movies is my kryptonite. We start this block in style because on June 2nd in Italy, we get a number that didn't arrive in the US until a year later in 1984, and it's Conquest. It begins in this dreamlike realm as we see young Ilias getting prepared to go on a quest and is given a magical bow and arrow as he passes into manhood. There's also the evil Okran, a mostly naked woman wearing a Destro mask, and she has werewolves with her. And these are some pretty complex fursuits, and they literally tear a woman in half. Okran has a vision of Ilias as a man with no face, killing her with his bow, so she sends her crew after him, but he's helped out by Mace here, who swings his bone around. And I know how that sounds, but it is what he does. The two team up and head out into the realm with Ilias teaching Mace how to use the bow. They travel around for a while and get into a bunch of shenanigans, which mainly involve Ilias being a bitch. Like, he gets captured and Mace has to save him. And then they're attacked by what appears to be tons of hand-drawn arrows, and he gets stabbed by one, and Mace has to save him. To get a cure for the poison, he's gonna have to fight against some zombies, though, and you probably should have expected zombies because this is by none other than our boy, Lucio Fulci. It was originally meant to focus more on the Mace character and was called Mace the Outlaw, but eventually changed things up. It was a joint venture between Italy, Spain, and Mexico, as Fulci just signed a 2-picture deal with a producer named Giovanni Di Clemente, but during the making of this film, the pair had a falling out, and Fulci refused to continue the contract the second the production was complete on this one. The producer was forced to then sue Fulci, but the director won out as the judge ruled that he could not be forced to work as per the Italian constitution. The second film was meant to be a horror flick called Alibi, but never even got to the scripting stage. Clearly, this was inspired by the wave of Conan knockoffs that was huge right around here, but you really can't call this a clone because it's distinctly Fulci and weird and features a number of bizarre creatures. It also has a unique look since the whole film was shot through a soft focus lens with a fog machine going constantly, creating this ethereal and dreamlike atmosphere throughout. It was unfortunately a bomb when it was released in Italy, and the reviews weren't all that kind, even though it was thought to be better than other Conan-style Italian flicks of the time. And those guys are crazy. This is a blast, and I'm going to give it a 3.5. It's just throwing everything at the wall here, and enough of it sticks, and that final act twist is just wild. Believe me when I say that you will never expect what happens to Ilias. Its SFCS is just a 2 though, since it's not all that well known outside of Fulci fans and doesn't even feature much in the way of his regular players. Should you watch it? It's a Fulci film, so of course.
Where is your friend?
I have no friends.
You lie! I will make you tell me! Angara Yuga!
A mere one day later, on June 3rd, we have a movie that premiered at Cannes a month earlier, but its release was June 3rd, and it's War Games. Babe Ruth shows up for a second, and we see a couple of guys in this bunker that has pretty firm stances on where you can and can't urinate. And they do a test launch of nuclear weapons that one of the men can't bring himself to go through with. Meanwhile, at NORAD, Jack Flack is working, as is Barry Corbin, and I feel like he plays military guys a lot, and also the manager of the Sedgwick Hotel. They're worried that the humans couldn't bring themselves to go through with activating the missiles, so they're keen on introducing a computer that can, called the Whopper. And great, now I'm hungry. It's programmed to continuously run war scenarios in order to learn about war over time. We then meet Ferris Bueller, and he loves video games, and his classmate is Stephanie number 5 alive. He agrees to help her with her grades, and ready for a flashback, there's the modem he uses to dial into the school's computer. Now, for my younger audience, you used to have to call into another computer and literally use your actual phone, placing it on the modem. They eventually streamlined that so you didn't need to actually use a phone cradle, but it still needed a phone line. He's able to alter the grades online, although she won't let him, but he does it anyway, and then while trying to find a new connection, accidentally taps into Whopper. He goes to try to find out more information about what the connection is and talks to Eddie Deason, doing that one character that Eddie Deason does when he's not harassing waitresses, and also the head of the River Rats. David starts talking to the program, and it says it.
Shall we play a game?
And he challenges it to global thermonuclear warfare, inadvertently sending a warning to NORAD. The problem is that the program chooses to continue the game since it doesn't understand that it's affecting things in the real world. False data is fed to the Soviets, stoking the fires of an actual World War III. The FBI are able to track David, though, and bring him in, and it becomes a race against time to stop the game before the nukes start dropping. And this one was the culmination of a whole bunch of fears at the time, brought to you by John Badham. And it's his first appearance anywhere on the project, but we'll see him again in the future. But by this point, he had already directed Saturday Night Fever, The Dracula with George Hamilton, and Blue Thunder. It was originally going to be directed by Martin Brest, who would eventually go on to make Beverly Hills Cop, but he was fired after 12 days of filming because his approach was considered too dark, and they wanted the film to have an element of fun. Badham was then brought on board and gave a lighter touch for the whole thing. The budget was fairly low at $12 million, and it would go on to be a massive hit, earning $125 million worldwide, and was critically acclaimed. It was even nominated for 3 Oscars, but it didn't win any, but it did get Best Director at the Saturn Awards. It was one of the first films to focus around hacking and sparked a massive increase in interest in it, and is even acknowledged as kicking off Ronald Reagan's administration to enact NSDD 145, a directive revolving around computer security. Also, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there's a sequel from 2008 that went straight to video called War Games: The Dead Code that involves a hacker facing off against a new program called Ripley, eventually using Whopper to combat it. It's, not good. And this is another 3.5, and this block is off to a great start. This may be a little overly long and doesn't have much to do in the middle, but it's still a cool story and a cool snapshot of a very specific time in history. Its significance is of 4, since it's a film that a large number of people saw, and it did really well, shaped actual policy, has a number of known names in it, but never really established itself as a huge mega blockbuster or anything. Should you watch it? Yes, a strange movie. The only losing move is not to watch.
How about a nice game of chess?
Now, about as far removed from that one as we can get, a movie debuted on the same day, June 3rd, it's The Man with Two Brains. We meet Dr. Har, played by some jerk, and he's also a brain surgeon. There's also Joan Wilder. The Joan Wilder? And she's a wicked woman tormenting her husband, and the doc accidentally runs her over. He then proceeds to operate on her, but hey, there's another doctor on hand, Dr. West. The operation is a success, and they get married, but her manipulations start right away. She won't have sex with the doc, and is boning the gardener.
Ready the bone wax. Betzenbaum scissors.
Betzenbaum scissors.
That cat out of here. Yes, sir.
The pressure starts to get to him, and you can't trust this guy since he was terrible to Sarah Connor. And it appears as if there's a series of brain thefts going on. Michael meets up with Sark, who wants to show him this innovative experiment that he's developed, but then there's also a mysterious elevator murderer killing women by injecting them with cleaning fluid. Doc Necessiter has a selection of brains in jars, and his plan is to develop the first ever brain transplant, and he's using brains of victims of that killer. His butler is the Jeffersons' neighbor, and then something strange happens. One of the brains starts talking to him, but he's the only one that can hear it. And it's a woman named Anne. If her voice sounds sort of familiar, it's because that's an uncredited Sissy Spacek. And Michael then ends up forced to deal with the manipulations of Dolores while having a secret affair with Anne, or Anne's brain. And no one can know about it, not even Zephram Cochrane. And this was the third project that paired Steve Martin with director Carl Reiner, and they had previously done The Jerk and Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. But Martin actually originally wanted someone else to direct. After seeing Scanners, the comic thought that David Cronenberg would be a great choice to handle the project. But Cronenberg wasn't interested in doing a comedy and was a little bit busy with Videodrome at the time. Turner was excited to take the gig since it was a about-face from the steamy, sexy roles that she had been doing and allowed her to be more comedic, even though she hated the scene where her character is paid by a man to touch her ass and requested a body double, which she says is the only time she used a body double for a sex scene. It had some nice reviews at the time, although none of them were overwhelmingly glowing, and it did fair in ticket sales, earning around $10 million. Since then, it's taken on a reputation for being an unsung comedy gem from Martin's filmography, even if it's a bit out of the ordinary for his work. And this is yet another 3.5, and this block is fun, and in terms of comedy, this is pretty uneven, but the stuff that lands hard. Plus, Turner is amazing in a comic role while also being crazy hot. Its significance is a 3 since it's fairly well known due to a massive amount of cable airplay back in the day and has a whole bunch of known players, but it's never been one of Martin's mainstream hits. Should you watch it? It doesn't take two brains to figure out that you should.
Hey, what does it do anyway?
It causes your brain to die last.
I don't mind. It's my voice. Damn.
This next one came out in the US on a limited release on June 10th and would get a wider release in its home country of Italy in March of 1984. And we've already covered 2019 after the fall of New York, so I guess make room for 2020 Texas Gladiators. It's a post-apocalyptic wasteland, of course, and I guess it's 2020, and yeah, this looks pretty much what I remember. There's this group of marauders, and they attack a convent and attack and kill everyone, and then a group of warriors called the Rangers show up to fight them off, and they rescue Maida, played by the white cannibal queen, Sabrina Ciani. But when Catchdog, one of their own, tries to force himself on her, he's outcast by the group's leader, played by Italian staple Al Cliver. It then jumps 5 years, and Nexus and Maida have a kid that has the most unrealistic voiceover. And they live in a little settlement while a group of bikers invade. They drive them off, but right afterwards, a different crew appears with more high-tech weaponry and wipe everyone out. Turns out that they're headed up by none other than Catchdog, and things take a turn when Nexus is gunned down. Maida is kept as a slave and soon encounters Holocron, and he's played by Peter Hooton. And you know what that means!
Hey, bud, what happened to your clothes?
I got molested in the little boy's room.
Him and his crew help Maida, but then are taken to serve under the rule of the Black One, cowboy-themed bad dude, and it's up to the Rangers to break free and take him down. And chalk this up as yet another Mad Max knockoff film, even though it's lacking the style and action of that and just doing post-nuke wasteland stuff. It was co-directed by Joe D'Amato and George Eastman, and we literally just encountered D'Amato in the last episode with Blade Master. It said that he only did the action scenes though, as the film was meant to be solely directed by Eastman, but since he was mostly an actor and not director, he wasn't very confident with doing the action scenes and asked Joe to step in and handle those, while he could work with the actors for the more dramatic scenes. He wasn't much of a fan of it though, and said that he only did these type of films for the money. The reviews on it were pretty rough, and it didn't make all that much of a splash, but it did get a smattering of airplay back in the day. And this breaks our streak because this is a 2. It's alright at times, but it's pretty boring for the most part, and it isn't giving me anything I haven't seen in any of the other Italian Mad Max clones. Its SFCS is just a 1.5 since it's mostly forgotten, and if it weren't for D'Amato being involved in a handful of Italian stars, it'd be a 1. Should you watch it? Like most things about 2020, you can do your best to forget it. When I decided that superhero stuff would qualify for the Sci-Fi project, I thought there'd be more, but really there hasn't been. But that's going to change on June 17th, because that's when Superman 3 came out. It starts differently as Montgomery Brewster is here, but he's not a millionaire yet. He's actually out of a job. We then get an extended comic opening as a beautiful woman walking down the street causes chaos by, like, just walking and looking good, I guess. But Clark Kent is here too, again played by the awesome Christopher Reeve, and the Supes is back in action. And so is Jimmy Olsen. Gus has gotten a job with a computer programming firm and turns out to be a whiz at it. Lois Lane returns, as does Perry White, but Lois is sent on vacation to Bermuda and out of the film, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Meanwhile, Gus has found a way to collect millions of dollars by going into the future and watching Office Space, while Clark and Jimmy go to Smallville on assignment. Clark goes to his high school reunion and meets up with Martha Kent.
Why did you say that name?
You're right, I mean, Lana Lang. We then meet Pootie Tang's greatest enemy, Dick Lecter, and his sister, Granny Ruth from Basket Case 2 and 3. His girlfriend is that woman from the beginning, and fun fact, Pamela Stevenson was a cast member of SNL for 1 season. Baxter recruits Gorman to do some computer manipulation of the stock markets, but Superman intervenes. So here's where this one gets juicy. Gus tries to make a replica of kryptonite, but has to do it on the fly, and the synthetic creation has an unexpected effect in that it corrupts Superman, leading to one of the greatest superhero sequences of all time, the Junkyard Brawl. And after the massive success of Superman 2, it was clear that more were going to be made. Richard Donner said that he wrote out treatments for more films after the second one, and his concept for the third entry featured Brainiac. Other early plans involved Mr. Mxyzptlk and Supergirl, and one of them involved Superman and Supergirl getting married, so yuck, cousins, but I guess not in that continuity. Eventually though, those were shot down due to being too expensive and also wanting Supergirl to have her own movie. Richard Lester was brought back on to direct, and the way that the Salkinds, the producers, treated Donner by firing him from the second film rankled some feathers. Because of that, Gene Hackman refused to return as Lex Luthor, although he later said that that wasn't true and he was just busy and thought that having Lex the villain of every movie was too repetitive. Kidder was also vocal about how they treated Donner, and it said that they punished her by only giving her a small role in this one, although again, the Salkinds denied that this was the case and said that they just wanted to focus on Lana Lang instead. Even Reeve said that he may not come back, and they considered replacements, reaching out to John Travolta, Kurt Russell, Jeff Bridges, though they all turned it down. There's even a rumor that they decided to cast Tony Danza, but Lester hated the casting and pleaded Reeve to return, which he finally agreed to. That's all unconfirmed, though. Pryor was brought on board when he went on Johnny Carson and talked about loving Superman 2, so they reached out to him, giving him a nice $5 million to appear in the film. The overall budget was a hefty $39 million, a bigger than normal price tag for this era, but unfortunately it was torn apart by critics who hated the more comedic stuff and the repetitiousness from the other two, and it was even nominated for a pair of Razzies. Audiences felt the same way, and it would only earn $80 million worldwide, and that doesn't sound too bad, but it did make a profit, but it was a patch on the box office of either of the earlier films, so it was clear that it was not as embraced. Reeve was unhappy with the results himself and said that after this, he would never play Superman again, although he changed his mind later on when he was allowed to have more story input for Superman 4. There's a few other things to mention about this one, and I think it's the only Superman film in which there's definite confirmation that Supes gets laid. And when they say that they had a nice night together, he's all like,
I'm sorry, but that wasn't me.
but that is like,
And you're next, Webster.
but like, did he mean that Webster's next to have a night with him? Is he gonna bone Webster? But one last thing, you know that this gave you nightmares when you were a kid.
This?
And I know it's not a great film, but I still love it. I'm gonna go with a 3.5. It's bad at times, but also really enjoyable at others, and the face-off alone is worth the price of admission. Its significance is a 4, since it's a freaking Superman movie, and still one that was pretty notable and successful, even if it was less profitable and was very widely seen. Should you watch it? Yes, I mean, it's not bad. It's just in a slump.
Me and Superman?
We're headed back to Fantasyland now for a feature that arrived in Italy on June 17th and didn't get a US release at all, and it's Throne of Fire. It has a woman who is visited by a man claiming to be the emissary of hell and impregnates her. And when she gives birth, mystics know about it and say the child will try to sit on the Throne of Fire, and it has to within a certain time frame or it will be destroyed. Meanwhile, it's an ugly kid named Morak. Time passes with little Maury being groomed to kill Aegon and take the throne. Then, as is mandatory in the beginning of any sword and sorcery flick, a group of marauders lays waste to an entire village. Morak is running out of time to pop that squad, and he has to marry the Princess Valkyrie as well, as his men are on the hunt for her. And when we meet her, it's once again Sabrina Ciani, and she's captured. There's then our standard barbarian-looking dude who rolls up, and it's Pietro Torrisi, and we last saw in both Gunin, King of the Barbarians, and the Sword of the Barbarians, and here he's a dude named Siegfried. We finally get a look at the throne, and he's not allowed to sit there until after he marries Valkyrie, and oops, if you try to, you get ruined like a well-done filet mignon. I don't care if you like it well done. The whole point of filet is that it's the most tender part of the steak. If you get it well done, you're negating the whole reason for it and paid more for no reason. Meanwhile, Siegfried goes into action to try to save the princess and the day, even though Morak can't be killed by regular means. And by now, it's a straight-up trend of Italian Conan knockoffs, and this is just another one of those, hitting most of the same notes. And it's from Francesco Prosperi, the same man who directed Torrisi in Gunin, but he'd also previously worked with Ciani in White Cannibal Queen, which he co-directed with Jess Franco. This would end up being his final film, though, as he retired right afterwards. And this is fine, it's a 2. It just feels so been there, done that. And you've seen this all and done better. It's entertaining enough, I guess, but just not compared to all its competitors. Its significance is just a 1 though, since it's not talked about at all and blends in with all the others and doesn't really have that many known faces outside of cult Italian stuff. Should you watch it, you could probably leave this throne empty. Get ready for a weird one, because on June 23rd, on the small screen, we have a curiosity called Wishman. It has an experiment as they're creating some little thing in a lab run by a guy named Dr. Wish, and the thing controls electricity. Joseph Bottoms is on hands, and we just saw him in the Horror Project with the Sins of Dorian Gray. And they declare the experiment a failure and choose to dissect it. Alex decides that he's not about that, so he smuggles the little dude out of there. He takes Wishman to pick up his girlfriend, Sarah Connor, and when the Wishman is revealed, it's, this. They take this monstrosity to their friend's house to hide out, and they welcome him in as he sort of tries to figure out how to be an actual living thing, and that includes spying on Maddie in the shower, which she actually takes in stride and seems totally cool with. And right after he looks in on her naked, he wants to hop in bed with them? What kind of movie is this? Well, then they have to protect Little Wishman from the government agents that are trying to get at him. And this is a pretty short TV movie. It's only about an hour long. It was clearly a blatant E.T. knockoff. It was actually a pilot for a TV series that ABC wanted to run, and they were looking to have something that was piggybacking off of Spielberg's film's success. It was directed by James Frawley, and this guy was not some TV schlub director. He's the director of the original Muppet movie and The Big Bus. But yeah, also did Wishman. If you think that watching a movie called Wishman, you're going to see something about a little creature that grants wishes, think again, since his abilities are all electrical based instead. But alas, this wasn't meant to be, since the pilot never ended up getting picked up, and the film would slip into obscurity, only showing up on specials like Shows That Never Were and such. Linda Hamilton says that she's super glad this didn't get picked up, since she was contracted to do it and would have had to pass on doing The Terminator shortly afterwards. And I'm giving this a 2. It's pretty dumb and pointless, but the silliness when the little fella is on screen and the oddly sexual shenanigans are pretty humorous. Its SFCS is just a 1 though, since it's pretty ignored and is basically just a footnote on Linda Hamilton's IMDb page. Should you watch it? You can do what ABC did, just sorta forget it.
Okay, buddy, we got it.
The next month, on July 16th, we're headed over to Japan for a film that went by many titles, but the most common is apparently The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. But it was also The Little Girl Who Conquered Time, Girl of Time, The Girl Who Cut Time, and several others. We meet a couple of school friends on a skiing trip, and one of them is Kazuko, and they run into their friend who has lost his skis somehow. They head back home as they slowly regain color, and they go back to school. After class, they're assigned to clean the classrooms, but something knocks down a beaker of chemicals, and the smoke gets to Kazuko and she passes out. She's rushed to the nurses and seems fine, but when they go back to the lab, everything is fixed. But as they walk home, she notices something weird with a kid riding on his bike. She falls for Fukamachi and continues to have these visions, and one night, there's an earthquake. The next day, she's almost crushed by a falling roof, but it's just a dream. Or is it? Because then it seems like Kazuko is Groundhog Daying and reliving the same day over and over. But of course, this was before Groundhog's Day and was actually based on a novel from 1967. If some of the visuals look bizarre and that opening with the transition from black and white to color was odd, that's because this is from Nobuhiko Obayashi, the director of House and School in the Crosshairs. But this is the most linear film that we've seen from him so far. It's what's referred to as an idol film because the lead actress Tomoyo Harada was a singer and teen star. It was released to mixed reviews, but none of that mattered to the audience since it was a huge hit. It was the second highest grossing Japanese film of that year, and the theme song for the film received a ton of airplay in multiple versions. There would be several other versions of the tale, including an animated one from 2006 and another live-action take from 2010, although both of those lacked this one's over-the-top visual flair. And I guess I'm an Obayashi fan. This is a 3.5. Even when his plots are straightforward, he's doing such interesting things with the filmmaking and cinematography that it's just a joy to watch. This is probably my least favorite of the stories I've covered of his, but it's still really fun. Its significance is a 1.5 since it's not that well known outside of Japan, but had a bit of influence, although it's another that's likely that has more relevance in its home country than it does here. Should you watch it? Yes, you've got time. We're headed back to Italy now because ripoffs never sleep. This is one that arrived there on July 22nd and didn't get a US release until December of 1984, and it's another dated title with 2019 after the fall of New York. So we've already been to 2020 here, so let's see how close this one is. We're told by a voiceover that there was a massive war 20 years ago, so I guess back in '99, and due to the radiation, no kids have been born since then. And there's this group in New York called the Uraks, and they're trying to figure out how to survive by doing tests on survivors that they find. There's a resistance fighting back against them though, although they're not doing that well. Meanwhile, in Nevada, Mad Max is here, or well, I guess someone with a very similar looking car, and he's involved in a death race. He wins and is rewarded by this clown, I guess, robot? His prize is a woman who we just saw in the new Barbarians, but he's then captured and taken to the president, the Dean from Pieces. And he tells Parsifal that there's a fertile woman somewhere in New York, and he has to go in and retrieve her and get her out within 24 hours or a bomb will go off in his head, and whoops, a wrong movie. He's sent in with 2 agents, Bronx and Ratchet, and they run into trouble right away, getting captured. The Uraks arrive, though, and take them to their base, along with a woman named Giara, but they escape only to fall into the hands of Big Ape, the leader of a group of mutants. He's played by Italian familiar face George Eastman. And together they have to break free and find that fertile lady. And this is yet another of the crop of films that popped up in the wake of The Road Warrior to be a post-apocalyptic wasteland film, although this throws in a very healthy dose of Escape from New York as well. In fact, I'd say it's more of the latter than the former, and it was from Sergio Martino. And this is the first time that we're seeing him here, but it won't be the last. One of the most interesting bits is that it bears some similarity to Children of Men, although it came around 20 years earlier, and a decade before the book that the film was based on. Not only does it share a plotline with a man searching for the last fertile human being, but both films feature a scene that has Picasso's painting Guernica hanging in the background. And I'll go with a 3 here. It feels a little like you've seen this all before, but it looks pretty cool, and the crazy twists it's throwing at you in the ending are wild. Its significance is just a 1.5 since it's obscure enough and doesn't really feature any known names, but it's gotten some attention as a ripoff film. Should you watch it? It's worth a look, yeah.
Stupid bastard!
We're staying overseas now and checking out Spain for a film that there was a joint venture between them, the US, and Italy, and it arrived on July 23rd there, and it's Hundra. And yeah, I mean, this whole block is feeling like clones. We meet a group of Amazons, and they're having trouble with making children. One of the members is Hundra, played by Laureen Landon, and they point out that she's still a virgin. She's set on keeping it that way. Then, do you remember a bit earlier when I said that like every sword and sorcery film started with a group of marauders invading a village? Well, a group of marauders invades their village, basically wiping everyone out. Hundra survives and escapes and fights back against a squad of the barbarians. She then seeks out the castle of wise women to plan revenge, but instead, she tells her to go out and make babies to repopulate the Amazons. He heads out on a quest to find a suitable suitor or to get revenge, whichever comes first. The first guy that she considers is a rude, drunken lout who attempts to force himself on her, so she takes him out. Continuing on her hunt, at one point she falls off of a massive tower and ends up in the bed of a handsome healer. But there's still the problem of the local pagan priest to worry about as well. And yes, this is just another one to cash in on Conan. And this one was directed by Matt Kimber. And that name might sound familiar, but I have a feeling it's not for the string of low-budget flicks that he directed in the 70s and earlier 80s, like this one. No, you probably know him as the creator and director of Glow, the gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. If you watched the Netflix show, Matt is the guy that Mark Maron was based on. And that background of bad movies that they always talked about in that show, well, this was one of them then. While shooting, Landon was big on doing all of her own stunts, and she did, with one exception, that fall from the tower, which was 180 feet down. She also opted for a stunt double for the nudity, but when she saw the footage of the woman that they chose, she was shocked to see that she was short and heavy set. Landon then said that she'd do the scene herself, as she didn't want people to think that that was her body. Claims that she believed that Kimber did that on purpose for that exact reason. It didn't get a lot of attention at the time, but it's since been regarded as one of the better Conan rips, and people praised the soundtrack by Ennio Morricone. And I like Hundra. I'll go with a 3 on it. It's entertaining and silly, and it's always moving, so it's never boring. And I like the flip-flop of having the badass warrior woman as opposed to the non-stop bland dudes that we've been getting in these. Its significance is just a 2, though, because it's not all that well known, even if its cult is growing a bit and it's earning more recognition. Should you watch it? Hundra, yeah! Let's end this block with something else that could probably be called Sword and Sorcery, but not really a Conan ripoff, and is debuted on July 29th, and it's Krull. It has this giant rock floating through space and settling down on a planet that doesn't appear to be Earth. We're told that it's the home of the Beast, and it has conquered many worlds with his slayers, and now it's here. Meanwhile, Lissa is marrying Colwyn in order to shore up an alliance between kingdoms, although they seem pretty into each other as well. Before they can seal the deal, the Slayers attack, and when they're killed, they make a very distinct sound. The wannabe stormtroopers win out, though, and take the princess with them, but Colwyn survives thanks to the help of Ynir, played by Freddie Jones, who we last saw in Firefox. He tells them to defeat the Beast, but then must seek out an ancient weapon called the Glaive, and they get it pretty easily, but then they have to find the Beast's fortress, since it moves around every day. Along the way, they meet Ergo, a magician, and a group of thieves that includes Hagrid, and the Dark Man, and a seer and his apprentice, and a Cyclops named Rel. They fight quicksand, doppelgangers, and a fantastic giant spider, losing several members on the way as they make their way to the Beast's castle to force a final face-off. And this began when Columbia Pictures president Frank Price decided that he wanted to do a fantasy film and called in producer Ron Silverman, which he jumped at. Multiple versions of the script were commissioned, including the original version in which the Beast was a dragon, and one that had a giant snake woman. As it was being made, there were rumors that it was actually meant to be a Dungeons & Dragons movie, but that was untrue. Peter Yates was brought on to direct, and this type of thing wasn't really his speed, as he had just done Eyewitness, and earlier the Peter Benchley tale, The Deep, and Mother Jugs and Speed. It was given a budget of around $30 million, making it a very expensive film for the time, but cheaper than Superman 3, but it was a risky venture for a property that no one had ever heard of. When they were done filming, Price was unhappy with Lissa's voice, said that he thought that audiences would prefer an American one, as opposed to one with an English accent, and hired Lindsay Krause to overdub all of her dialogue, although it's unclear if that's the reason why, or if he was just simply dissatisfied with her performance. Because of that, Lisette Anthony would state that she hated the film, but not only because of the voice thing, but because she felt that her character was too fragile and soft, and all she did was hang out and wait to be rescued. But then, reviews would be soft, and it was criticized pretty strongly and called empty. Audiences seemed to agree, since it was a bomb, dead on arrival, only bringing in around $17 million and disappearing quickly, although it would then get a ton of play on cable. Over time, it would build an audience and develop a massive cult following, and recently the rights to do a remake were purchased by Warner Brothers, with J.J. Abrams directing, although no more word on that has been reported. And I love Krull, so I'm going with a 4. Like, sure, the effects are dated, and as a hero, Corwin's nothing without his supporting cast, but that supporting cast is gold, and the world it creates is really enjoyable. Its significance is a 3.5, and I wish I could give this higher, but let's face it, it was a big bust. It eventually made an impact, but certainly not when it was released, and it had no follow-ups to carry on its legacy. Should you watch it? Yep, and then pretend to throw around an imaginary glaive for an hour afterwards.
Wait! Wait for me! I've just remembered. I've urgent business in this direction.
What business?
Staying alive.
So there you have it, kind of the middle of 1983 here, as there's really not that many episodes of Sci-Fi for 83, but my favorite on this block is gonna be Krull. There was quite a bit of good movies in this one, but I think Krull was the only one that I was really like super into when I was younger and still really enjoy today. But there was some good competition for it here. Let me know which of these was your favorite down below in the comments. I'd like to know which of these you've seen, and which of these you haven't seen, and which of these you would now like to see. Tell me that down below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and hit the bell to get notified when new videos go up. And of course, check out the Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines, where you can help support this channel, keep the project going. But we still have a couple of more episodes left to go on the Sci-Fi project right here on the 80s Project.